For decades, Al Roker had mastered the art of being the steady, smiling presence millions of viewers welcomed into their homes each morning, a familiar rhythm as dependable as sunrise itself. Yet beneath that warmth and practiced ease was a truth he had only recently begun to understand, that longevity in a world moving faster than ever wasn't built on perfection or endless optimism, but on something far more delicate and often hidden: the quiet courage to be emotionally fragile. It was a realization that didn't arrive all at once, but instead unfolded gradually in the small, unguarded moments between broadcasts, in the pauses when the cameras cut and the studio lights dimmed, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than it used to. And at home, Deborah Roberts noticed it first: the way Al's laughter lingered a beat longer before fading, the way he sometimes sat at the kitchen table long after his coffee had gone cold, as if trying to gather pieces of something he couldn't quite name. One evening, as the soft hum of the television filled the room, Deborah gently asked him a question that would stay with him far longer than any headline. When was the last time you let yourself feel everything, not just the good parts? And for a man who had spent a lifetime helping others process the world, the question felt surprisingly difficult to answer, because the truth was, somewhere along the way, he had learned to filter his emotions, to present only what was comforting, what was steady, what reassured the audience that everything, somehow, would be okay. But the world had changed, and so had the people watching, and what they seemed to crave now wasn't just reassurance, but authenticity. A sense that the person speaking to them understood not only the facts of their lives, but the feelings that came with them. Over the following weeks, Al began to reflect on the subtle shift in his role, noticing how the stories that resonated most deeply weren't always the biggest or the most dramatic, but the ones that allowed a glimpse of vulnerability, a moment where the polished surface gave way to something real and human. And it wasn't about breaking down or losing composure, but about letting the audience see that even the most familiar faces carried their own quiet uncertainties. He shared these thoughts with Deborah during their evening walks, the air cool and still around them. And she listened with the same steady presence that had anchored him for years, reminding him that strength and softness were not opposites, but companions, that the willingness to feel deeply was not a weakness, but a form of connection that audiences could sense even through a screen. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Al began to change the way he approached his mornings, not by altering his professionalism, but by allowing small moments of honesty to surface, a pause here, a more reflective tone there, a willingness to acknowledge the emotional weight of a story rather than smoothing it over too quickly. And in those moments, something unexpected happened. Viewers responded, not with concern, but with gratitude, as if they recognized in his openness a reflection of their own lives, their own efforts to navigate a world that rarely slowed down long enough to be fully felt. It became clear to him then that the secret to staying relevant, to remaining a trusted presence in people's homes year after year, wasn't about resisting change, but about embracing a deeper kind of truth, one that required a certain vulnerability, a willingness to let the cracks show just enough to let the light through. Deborah saw the difference in him as well, the way his energy felt less strained, more grounded, as if he had stopped carrying the burden of appearing unshakable and instead found a way to stand comfortably within his own humanity. And one morning, as he prepared to leave for the studio, she smiled and said, "You don't have to hold it all together to hold people's trust," a simple sentence that seemed to capture everything he had been learning. Back under the bright studio lights, with the familiar hum of production all around him, Al felt a quiet sense of clarity, understanding that the role he had played for so long was evolving, not into something less stable, but into something more genuine, where the connection with viewers was built not just on consistency, but on shared experience, on the unspoken acknowledgement that life was complex and often unpredictable, and that it was okay to feel that complexity rather than hide from it. As the broadcast began, his voice carried the same warmth audiences had always known, but there was a subtle depth to it now, a resonance that came from allowing himself to be fully present, not just as a host, but as a person. And in that presence was a quiet promise that he would continue to show up each morning not as an unchanging symbol of certainty, but as someone willing to grow, to feel, and to connect. And in doing so, he discovered that authenticity, even in its most fragile form, was not only sustainable, but enduring, a foundation strong enough to carry him through the ever-changing landscape of modern television and into the hearts of those who would come to see him not just as a familiar face, but as a trusted companion in the shared experience of living.